Hello, Sharks. Before we get started today, I wanted to make it really clear that this is the second part of a video series where I go through a bunch of hands that I played recently in the high-stakes US Poker Open. To go back and watch the first part of this video, head over to pokercoaching.com/USPO right now. Make sure you do it because that'll make this video make a whole lot more sense. So check that out before you watch this video at pokercoaching.com/USPO. Have fun. All right, we're back at it. Second $10,000 no-limit hold'em tournament of the US Poker Open. Let's take a look. Jake Daniels, loose, splashy, aggressive player. That said, my only experience with him before this was from a, what was it? 25, 50, 100 no-limit hold'em cash game on Poker After Dark, where the blinds went up after like 2 hours to 50, 100, 200, and he played insane. He was in a lot of hands, battling, splashing. He stacked me. When I opened it up King Jack, he 3-bet from the small blind with 10-3 of spades. Okay? Flop comes like King 9-3 or something. King 9-2. King 9-2. One spade. You know how this goes. He bet, I called, turned with some spade. He bet, I called. River was another spade, giving him a flush. He jammed, I called. I lost. And against players like that, you just have to do everything you can to let them make some sort of aggressive play, some sort of line that will result in them over bluffing, right? That said, Jake played substantially more just like tight aggressive in this tournament. I'm not sure why he has such a drastically different style from one game to the other, but he certainly did that day. So anyway, he's playing perhaps a little bit too loose, but pretty standard. He opens it up under the gun. I like to just call. Let's take a look at our charts real quick, just to see if this is anywhere near reasonable, or if we should just 3-bet it every time. As we see here, Jacks mixes it up. And as you get deeper stacked, I know we only have 80 big blind charts here, but as you get deeper stacked, I think you're going to call even more with hands like Jacks. Just try to flop a set. You really don't want to 3-bet and get 4-bet, even if he is a little bit on the looser side. So we call. It's a very good flop for me. Jack 10-2. What do we do? What do we do? Jake now bets small, 2,500. It's kind of a bummer. You always would much prefer your opponent to be betting bigger in this scenario because when he bets small, he's actually giving himself a pretty good price with hands like Ace-King, King-Queen, King-9 suited, right? And you don't really want to let those hands see the turn for free/cheap. So I definitely think that in this scenario, raising is the ideal play. But is it the ideal play against Jake, who I know perhaps likes to barrel it off? Maybe. And I don't know. I don't know the answer to this one because this is a very exploitative spot. I do know GTO Solver usually likes to just slow play top set, because it's kind of hard for your opponents to have anything. But in this particular spot, it's really easy for him just to have aces, kings, queens, ace-king, king-queen, right? So I could definitely get behind raising in this scenario, but if I do think he's opening all sorts of nonsense, like ace-6 of hearts and then tripling it off, well then calling's a whole lot better, right? Because he's drawing basically dead. Big blind calls as well, which is kind of a bummer because he almost certainly has some equity. Turns a king, which is not great. Jake now bets 6K. Similar spots on the flop, except for now I could actually be beat. Notice I could easily be beat by kings or ace-queen or queen-9. However, when he bets small like this, I definitely think he's more weighted towards non-premium hands. Usually, most people in this scenario, when they keep betting turn, especially if they bet big on the turn, are going to be very polarized to either sets and better or a draw. And there are some draws available, like lots of club draws that can bet turn and call a raise. So when he goes this size, I think he's going to be a little bit more weighted towards marginal made hands like ace-king, king-queen, ace-jack. Maybe hands like 2-pair, Jack-10, King-10. Probably not straights, though. The question is, if I raise, will he call with a hand like King-9 suited or Ace-King even? He probably shouldn't, because if I'm raising here in this scenario, I mean, what can I really have? I have to have a pretty good hand or a pretty good draw, right? Also, I really don't want to raise and get jammed on. I realize sets are very good, but if you think about his range, it's going to contain every single Ace-Queen and a whole lot of Queen-9 suiteds. So this is a spot where I think we just have to call. Also, every once in a while, big blind has the nuts. So if it goes 6K, call, 24K, I can just call and try to spike on him. I call. Big blind fold, so that's good. We just probably have the effective nuts here. River, he bets 18K. If the river was a blank instead of this 2, like say it was a 3, and he bets 18, can we go for the raise? Probably not, because we're just raising into all the ace queens, right? And a hand like ace king, or even king jack if he has it, may find a fold, which would be really annoying on a 3 blank. Because notice I could have all the ace queens as well, and I could have all the queen 9 suited. So I mean, maybe I don't play every queen 9 suited, but probably would when Jake opens. So in this scenario, if the river was a blank and he bets big, like 18 into 28, I think it's probably just a call even with a set. When the river's a 2, though, it just doesn't matter because now I have the nuts. Obviously, he could have kings. Obviously, he could have 2s. But he could also have random ace 2 suited. He could have straights that will feel kind of inclined to call now. And it may even make like a loose call with something like king queen, thinking I'm running some ridiculous bluff. So we're definitely putting in the raise. The question is to how much. And again, very exploitative spot. In my experience, people do not especially like calling off for all their money in tournaments, especially in the early levels. This is a re-entry tournament, so you know that may not necessarily apply, but I think he thinks I'm a little bit on the straightforward side. Maybe because I have taken the strategy against him so far of make a hand, don't fold, right? So for that reason, I think I can't just go for all the money. I think if I go for all the money, he's only going to call off with a straight or better, as he should, right? So he's not really screwing up if I go all in. Whereas I think if I go small, like 45K or 50K, he may find a hero call with aces, ace king, king jack, king 10. So I think that's pretty nice. I will say if I go 45K and he jams me, pretty miserable spot, right? Because would he really jam here with a straight? I think it'd be pretty insane. Anyway, I go 55. I think that might be a little bit too big, looking back at this, because will aces or ace king really call 55K here? It's pretty optimistic, right? Notice I blocked king jack and well, you could have king 10, I suppose. Probably doesn't play every king 10. Probably only king 10 suited. Well, unless he's playing loose. Who knows what he has. So this is a spot where I think I should have gone a little bit smaller, because I think when I start going big like this, we are going to get even a hand like ace king to fold, which is, I think, a lot of his range when he takes this line. And, I mean, yeah, we get full value against a straight, but I think straight's kind of unlikely. Anyway, he snap called me. So I was like, oh. I didn't even know what was happening. He snap called me. Turned over my hand, and he showed the king 10 offsuit. He just said he can't have the king 10 offsuit. Ha, go figure. I think this king 10 is probably just a fold. If Jake's watching this, he told me. He's a member to Poker Coaching. If he is watching this, I would tell you, find some bluffs. Find some logical bluffs. I mean, seriously, there's like none. I could have ace x of clubs, but notice that blocks some of his auto folds, right? What could I have? Call the flop. Would I call the flop with like ace 5 of clubs? I mean, I guess for the small bet I would. 9-8. Would I bluff the river with 9-8 when you bet flop into multiple people, bet turn, and then bet river in a spot where you just have all the nuts in your range? I think it'd be pretty insane. I mean, I can't even find logical bluffs here. I'm sure I'm under bluffing. And against players who I perceive to be loose and splashy in general, then I think they just call a lot. So if they're going to call a lot, I'm probably under bluffing. Anyway, he called the king 10 pretty quickly, and I think this is just a fold. It's an annoying spot. You certainly don't like it, but I mean, there just aren't very many logical bluffs. Like, I'm not playing queen 8, right? So if I'm not playing random queen 8, and I probably won't even bluff the ace x, because notice that blocks pocket aces. I mean, it blocks ace queen as well, but it blocks pocket aces, blocks ace king. These are the auto folds I want him to have. What am I really bluffing with? 9-8 of clubs and 8-7 of clubs. That's it. Notice those blocks some flush draws that I'd like him to have to auto fold. Just a fold. I'm not bluffing very often here. If the river was a 3, I think it'd be way more reasonable, because then while he does have straights, he also has like a lot of 2-pair that could go for value like this. And then he's a little bit more inclined to call. I don't think the 2 changes a lot in terms of my like super relative hand strength, but I do have some sets like this that do get stronger. Anyway, I raised it up. He snap called me, and we got some chips. But where'd they go? Who knows? Like I said, if it's just like a standard flipping spot, I I'm not going to show it because I don't really remember it, and I honestly don't really care. There are a lot of spots in poker where it's just like 30, 40 big blinds each, ace, king against queens, kings against jacks, whatever, you're just in. So don't be too afraid of playing big pots. Sometimes you're going to win and sometimes you're going to lose. All right, Kerry Katz opens. Kerry Katz is, I'm not going to say on the tighter side, but he is generally on the more conservative side. He's also the type of player who I think, again, really doesn't like getting stacked. So given that's the case, well, that's just the read I'm going to go on. Playing a probably regular distribution of hands from early position. He doesn't get too out of line pre-flop, I don't think. He may get a little bit looser, splashy every once in a while, but I don't think that's going to be the case under the gun like ever. Anyway, I call, pocket twos, and I flop a set. I check. He bets. Kind of big. What do you think we should do here with the twos? So I actually ran this one in the solver because I was not sure if I need to just like put in a min raise immediately, put in a shove immediately, or call. And let's see, is this it? This is it. As we see here, twos and fives and sevens, if I have the sets, are very clear calls here. Why are they very clear calls? Well, I really just don't have all that many hands that want to raise. Notice I actually don't have very many hands that want to go all in at all. Just a few smattering of sevens, right? I'm sure I got a few random bluffs in here, like ace-5, ace-3, etc. But I'm really not doing much shoving at all. We are just a little bit too deep for that. So we're doing a lot of min raising, or 2.1x raising. And you might say, are we really min raising here with like ace-7? And the answer is yeah. When we get down to this stack depth, we just have to be kind of willing to stack off with hands like, well, ace-7. And it doesn't mind a lot of protection, right? So ace-7 in this scenario really doesn't care if the opponent folds out queen-jack, right? I will say also, Kerry's not really the type to barrel all that often. So if anything, that's just going to make me a little bit more inclined to get it in with some of my decent top pairs immediately, because he's not going to take a hand like queen-jack and keep betting it on a random non-queen or jack turn, I don't think. So this is a spot where I would probably be pretty willing to just get it in with these sevens, a lot of the sevens really. Understanding that, yeah, whenever he has me beat, I lose, but that's okay. That said, sets, sevens, fives, and twos are all just calling. You got to slow play here. Yes, there are clubs available, but he's going to have a whole lot of hands that do not contain clubs and are drawing thin or dead. So I love calling. Turns an ace, easy check. This is a board where he's going to, or turn that he's going to be betting a ton. I just said he probably wouldn't bet the queen-jack, but I bet if he had the queen-jack here, he would bet it. Now the question is, should we call or should we shove? I also wasn't sure about this one because we have super nuts effectively, right? And if we run it through the solver against GTO, turns out sets all shove now. Check shove turn. Notice even some pretty weak hands like 3-2 suited, 4-2 suited go for the shove. Pretty cool to see. 5-4, 5-3, like pairs with gut shots go for the shove here. I'm probably not shoving in this scenario. I definitely think Kerry is in general weighted towards premium made hands here, like good aces. Although I wouldn't be shocked if he's going to go for the bluff with queen-jack, right? So the question is Kerry the type of player who will bluff the river if I check call? And I would venture to say no. Like I said, I don't think Kerry's just bluffing it off all that often. However, will he find a big fold if I shove here on the turn with like ace-10? And look, I think he's probably going to call with ace-10, but I wouldn't be shocked if he finds a nitty fold. So this is a tough spot. Also in live poker, we mentioned this in the first hand from the first $10,000 tournament where I folded the top pair because, kind of got a vibe he didn't have anything. I don't recall this particular scenario amazingly well, but if I got the vibe he didn't have anything, what are my options? Well, I have to call, right? So this is a scenario where I realize solver says to shove, and I totally get that the solver says to shove. Again, if you are going to play like GTO, make sure you find the adequate bluffs with the gut shots and the pairs. These all are, well, mostly flush draws, I presume, with the random 4 and the random 3. All these are flush draws, which makes a lot of sense. All the flush draws make sense to check shove. All the good aces make sense to check shove. But these gut shots I do not think are quite so logical, at least for me. Like if you give me 5-4 here, do I really want to jam in 5-4 into this? I wouldn't think so, but apparently the answer is yes. Anyway, I called here. River's at 8 of clubs. This is the big bummer. Whenever he does happen to have a an ace, it's going to let it go check on the river, which is annoying. But I let it go check, and he announced, you win. Kerry's not the type to randomly slow roll me, nit roll me, whatever, with like ace jack and say, you win. In this scenario, I have to believe Kerry just had stone nothing. And if he had stone nothing, then maybe we had the live pro read there, maybe we didn't. This is the tough thing about live poker, is that you can justify almost anything with, had a read. And the tough thing is that sometimes you will have a read. Sometimes you will not have a read. And if you consistently make plays based on reads, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong, it's very difficult to keep track of whether or not your reads are actually good. I would definitely venture to say that most players in general, should give a little bit less credit to their reads. I feel like, if anything, I kind of downplay my reads to the point that maybe I should even give them more credit, me personally, because I know I just like don't make so many plays based on them. But like right here, it's clearly just a shove from a GTO point of view. But I did not do it. Why did I not do it? I know I did this because I thought if he did not have an ace, he's just going to literally fold every time. And I thought he's probably drawing super thin. Or I thought he had the nuts and was going to shove river anyway. But notice, on some of these bad rivers, like low clubs for sure, he's just going to let it go check even with hands like ace king. So we want to just shove immediately, get full value, and this was probably a bit of a mistake by me. I should have just shoved turn. That said, whenever he says you have it, he probably had literal airball, queen jack, and only way to get any value was to check. But notice he didn't bluff it. If he's not going to bluff it, even on a scary river for my weak top pairs, then like clearly why am I checking? Doesn't make any sense. The main value in checking is to give him every opportunity to bluff, because he's always going to pay off with the good hands anyway, right? So I don't really care about the good hands. I mainly care about the bad hands. Is there a way to get money in with the bad hands? There, I thought he would bluff sometimes. And to be fair, maybe he does, but he didn't that time. One thing also worth noting, I know we kind of breezed past this, but whenever Kerry bets 13K on the turn out of my 36 and I call, this is a spot where some people will apply an amount of pressure like this with some garbage hand, thinking, if I call, I must not be folding the river. And that very well could be true. That said, I know if I had 5-4 here, I probably wouldn't have shoved like the solver said. I probably would have found a reluctant call and then folded the river. So clearly that's not necessarily right, but a lot of people will apply pressure like this, like a pretty good amount of my stack, and then just never bluff river, thinking that if I make it past the turn, I must have a hand that's going to call, or I'll call most of the time, and then they're just never going to bluff river. If that's the case, if you see people make this particular size, not in relation to the pot, but in relation to my stack, where they think this is a committing play for me, then perhaps we just want to shove in these scenarios, because when he has nothing, he's not going to bluff it off, and when he has a good hand, like an ace, he's just going to call it off every time. All these little nuances you can find looking back at the hand, but sometimes these things actually are relevant. And if you do play with people often enough, as you probably do in your local casino or in your local home game, you can find spots like that where people will make these particular plays. And if you can find spots where you know they're just like either really weak or really strong, if you know they're really weak and they're not going to bluff the river, you might as well get it in. All right, we raise queen 10 suited, perfectly fine and standard, flop a flush draw. Seems like a great spot to bet. We are pretty deep. If I bet and get raised, we can easily call. We discussed this a lot in the tournament masterclass, that if you bet a draw and have to fold to a raise, and your draw has pretty good equity, like 25, 30, 35%, you probably screwed up. Unless it's some uncommon line. Like right here, if I bet any amount and he shoves it all in on me for 176,000, whatever, you got it. But if I make a bet of, let's say, 4,000, 6,000, something like that, and then he raises to 20, I can just easily call and try to spike a club, right? So this is a spot where we're going to be betting draws like that. I bet 4, he calls. And I'm not going to say it's optimal to go ahead and triple it off here, but I already know I have all the nuts, or effective nuts in my range, right? I have ace-king, ace-queen, ace-6 suited, ace-2 suited, sixes. Probably not twos, but he doesn't have aces, right? And he doesn't have ace-king most of the time. So I have a lot of really good hands here. And I have a lot of bluffs with good equity, right? So this is a spot where I'm going to be betting the flop really wide, probably everything. And then I'm actually going to be continuing to bet the turn very often with a pretty wide range. We get the 10 of diamonds. This is one of these spots where I think we don't really need to fear getting raised, because if I do bet and get raised, I can still call, right? I mean, like I said, he's not going to rip it in if I bet 10,000 or 12,000. Also, I can still get called by some worse hands. Notice that worse clubs will call. or king X of clubs. If he had diamonds, diamonds will call, right? He could have had diamonds against a small bet. If he has a 6 or a 2, he's going to call. So I think this is a reasonable spot to continue betting, even though I have what's very clearly a marginal made hand. In this scenario, I'm not all that concerned about getting raised by an ace, because you have to think he's going to raise most of his best aces on the flop. Therefore, he probably has a weaker ace. Weaker ace has no reason to raise here, given I can have, like I said, all the best aces. So I don't think we're going to get raised all that often at all. There's some spots like this come up where you can extract value from worse made hands and draws, and also just build the pot for the times that you do get there on the river. There is a little bit of merit in just making the pot bigger if whenever I make a flush I get to put my money in. When I bet here, if he calls and I miss on the river, I don't improve, and he checks, I'm just going to check behind. River's the jack of spades. Didn't improve. Seems like a pretty easy check behind to me. If I bet here, will he ever call with worse than my hand? I don't think so. Will he ever fold a hand better than my hand? Will he fold like queen jack of diamonds? One hand? I don't think so. So just easy check. And we did get full value from the 6. Tough spot on the turn with the 6 because the king is not necessarily good if he gets there on the river with like king 6 because I could easily have ace king. And there's no guarantee I'm going to pile in a lot of money if he gets there. The tough thing is that I could definitely be betting with all the gut shots, right? Well, the Broadway cards. I don't really have the low gut shots. So it's a nasty scenario for him because, like, imagine I do have 8-7 suited and I bet the flop with everything and I turn a gut shot. I'm going to keep betting. Like I said, we can bet very frequently on the turn here. And he's going to call. Then the river comes a jack. I'm going to bluff with the 8-7 and win the pot, right? If I make an 8 or a 7 on the river, I'm going to check and win the pot. So when I miss, I win the pot. When I get there, I win the pot. That's not good. What about queen jack? Same thing, right? If I bet turn and he calls and I miss on the river, I'm going to bluff. He's going to fold. If I hit on the river, I'm going to bet. He's going to fold. Well, if I hit a king, right? Actually, he's going to call the king because then he just loses more. If I get a jack or a 10, I'm going to let it go check, and win. So this is a spot where this hand plays like really, really poorly on the turn. I don't think my opponent necessarily could have done much different here because if I bet small like this, he's getting really good odds. But his equity realization is going to be very, very bad in this scenario with this type of hand. And even when he gets there sometimes, he's going to have big reverse implied odds. So pretty rough spot. And to be fair, fold pre-flop maybe? I'm not going to say you should definitively fold pre-flop, but I mean, let's look at 80 big blind charts. Let's look at big blind versus hijack raise. I mean, he's probably supposed to play this hand, but I could be convinced that it's not like printing money. And you see all these hands in this region down here, 4-3, 10-7, jack 7, queen 6, queen 5, king 4, king 5. I know he has king 6. But like all of these hands, if you think your opponent is going to play very well post-flop and you know that you're not the best out-of-position post-flop player in the world, I don't hate folding. Okay? Jack 10 offsuit. Raise from the button. Okay. We'll be calling the majority of the time, basically every time. Do we ever 3-bet this? Big blind versus raise from button. I know that I personally don't, but we do see a small portion of 3-betting here. Notice these suited connected type hands 3-bet. Well, junky suited connected type hands 3-bet every once in a while. You definitely want to make sure you're working those in. Anytime you look at the GTO solver and you're playing against a good player, you need to make sure you're working in at least some, not necessarily these particular hands like 8-5 suited 10% of the time, but you probably want to take 9-7, 9-6, 10-6, 8-6, 7-6, 6-5, 10-7, 9-8, 10-9, right? All of these and just 3-bet them every time. You don't necessarily need to find the 5-4 half the time or the 10-5 32% of the time. But you should use these every once in a while. Also, I don't think it's necessary to go with these pretty junky hands. Instead, just do like all ace-10, all king-jack, and you'll be fine. So you're going to 3-bet some good suited connected types, well, marginal suited connected type stuff, and then just a good strong linear range. Nice and easy to remember, right? Anyway, I call. I check. He bets. This is a scenario where I definitely think raising is viable. If my hand's a little bit better, I'm almost certainly raising. Something that I've learned from just studying deep stacked in the GTO solver, that top pair good kicker basically always check raises, like ace 10, king 10 here. Jack 10 is probably a little bit weak. You're going to find that jack 10, 10 9, 10 7 do a lot of calling. Turns to 7. And I opt to lead. All right, this may be a little bit fancy. Why is this a little bit fancy? Because my opponent actually does have some nuts in his range. The times you want to lead on the turn are when your opponent does not have all that many nut hands and you have a lot of nut hands. And while I do have a lot of nut hands here, so does my opponent. He would definitely raise pre-flop with all Jack-9, right? Also a lot of 9-6 suiteds. Probably all 9-6 suiteds and maybe even some 9-6 offsuit. I'm trying to remember who this was. I remember it was one of the good American kids. I forget exactly which one it was. Good, strong GTO player. So I decided to lead here, and typically the plan when you're leading is you're going to lead very frequently when you do decide to lead, but I don't think this is the card to do it. I should have just checked here and check called, I think. It's also really bad if I lead and get raised with this particular hand for sure, but you got to realize I have the best hand almost every time. You may not fully realize that, but I do have the best hand almost every time because we block top pair and over pairs are hard to have. So there definitely is merit in protecting here because if you think about my opponent's range, whatever it is has pretty good equity. So if it has pretty good equity, I don't really want to check and let that see the showdown for free, right? Like imagine he has king, queen. Rather than just fold. The problem though is that my opponent may decide to run a bluff on me every once in a while, and that would be really bad. Where if he raises, I call, then I check the river and he just decides to go for it. And I fold or I call. It's pretty bad either way, right? So I think this is just completely unnecessary. If this board was a little bit lower, like say everything was 2 notches lower besides the 2, so make it 8, 6, 5, then I would like leading way more with a hand like an 8 for top pair then. Because then I have a lot more nuts than my opponent because he's probably not raising all the offsuit low straights, whereas I would have those. This was just not necessary. I lead, he calls. Easy check on most rivers in this scenario whenever I lead and he calls. And I would want to keep betting on the river with a very polarized range, either busted draws or just like really good made hands, and I would go very big. So betting small here is nice if he doesn't do all that much raising because I just get to get protection and value, right? And then the play is to check the river and then check call with this hand most of the time. We discussed this concept in one of my books, a collaborative book, Excelling at Tough No-Limit Hold'em Games. And this play goes horribly wrong if your opponent raises adequately from a GTO point of view. And you're going to find hands like queens just raises and plays for stacks in this scenario. Does the opponent do that? I don't know. Most people don't. Most people just call. And if they're going to do a lot of calling, leading's not all that bad because you just get to see the river every time, right? And like I said, there really aren't that many bad rivers. The only bad rivers for me are a high diamond, a jack, and a 6. Everything else is fine, right? This time we get a high diamond that's also a jack. So now the most likely draws that the opponent could have, the 9, which make a lot of sense. He could easily have 10-9, 9-8, 9-7, etc. And the flush both come in. He could easily have a flush. He doesn't want to raise the turn with a flush draw or any, not a lot in general, because if he raises and I jam, he is in a pretty bad spot. And I could have some nut hands here, right? So anyway, on this river, I think I have a pretty easy check. And I was going to call a lot of bets. But then he pots it. Annoying spot. Very annoying spot. I definitely wish he did not pot it. When he pots it, he's going to be very polarized. So now I have to find bluffs. What bluffs make sense to blast it here? If he had a jack, like queen jack, you got to think he would just check it back. If I had a 9 here, would I check? I would have, for sure. So that's good because I'm somewhat well protected here. The tough thing is that he could easily take a hand like an 8 and bluff it. Like if you gave him ace 8 or ace 7, I bet he would bluff it. And I really didn't know much about this good aggressive kid yet. If I knew what I knew today, would I call? It's coming back to me. This is the guy Chris Brewer. Good, loose aggressive. Well, I think pretty GTO type player. Should we call against him? Like, I don't hate it. Again, another spot. Live reads, right? You may say, can you really make live reads on the kids? I don't know. I don't try all that hard. If they come to me, they come to me. It's probably fine to fold here. This jack of diamonds, even though it gives me 2 pairs, a pretty bad card. The opponent's not value betting a worse made hand for value. I mean, he could be bluffing with the ace 8 type stuff, like I said. But I think this is just a fold. It's annoying. Super annoying. Notice if I just check the turn and he checks, I can easily check call river. If I check the turn and he bets, I can easily call. If I check the river and he bets, I can easily call. Because then we've induced a lot of bluffs. Here, I know I have a lot of 9s, and he's still blasting me. So, just got to fold. Annoying spot. And to be fair, maybe we actually played it fine. Just sometimes you get bad rivers. If you go through the tournament masterclass, looking at various, your equity on various rivers, sometimes it just goes right in the dumpster. And with that hand, I think it just goes right in the dumpster when on that Jack of diamonds, or especially Queen of diamonds or King of diamonds or whatever. All right, raise, call, Ace 4 offsuit. One more big blind to try to win 7. Sure. Bottom pair. I'm sorry, top pair. Top bottom pair. Might as well be bottom pair. Top pair with a gut shot. Check, check, check. That's great for me. Turns a 4. This is against the kid, Brock Parker. Very good battling player as well. This is a spot where I have to presume it's going to check through a ton. I have a lot of 3s. My opponents have basically none. So this is a spot where, even though I don't have the nuts, I do have the best hand a lot, and it's very easy for my opponents to have a random ace or a random draw, or even a random hand like pocket 8s that will check, 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 turn, check, 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 river, and never put a diamond in the pot unless they make a set. So I realize that's not all that big of a concern, like how do I not get outdrawn by 8s? But imagine one has 8s and one has 9s, they both have 4 outs that only pay me off if they get there, right? So I think here's a spot where it's pretty free to go for a bet, because I have the best hand the majority of the time, and I have a lot of 3s, whereas they both have very few. I realize Brock over here in the low jack could easily have ace 3 or pocket 3s. Small blind could have it, but probably not. He could have pocket 3s or ace 3, but that's it. So I think it's a pretty nice spot to go for a bet. And I don't think we need to bet all that big, because I'm really only betting here with like very high equity draws, made hands that are almost certainly good, like this, and a lot of 3s. I bet, Brock calls, river's a 10. Interesting spot. We have some draws, of course. They would love to go for the bluff on the river. The opponent definitely has a lot of ace X, right? Could even have some underpairs that decided to get splashy against a small river bet. So I think we need to go for a bet, and I think we can go pretty small. When you're out of position, you often can go for small blocking type bets with a range of a lot of marginal made hands, some nuts, some bluffs. And I think that's the spot. I think it's a pretty clear marginal made hand. The alternative play is to go big, like 50K. If I get the vibe he has just like a lot of ace, king, ace, queen, etc. He could just have ace 10, which would be a bummer. I think either play is fine, either small or big, depending on what you want to do, depending on read you have on your opponent. The problem with small is that every once in a while, he's just going to try to blast us. I had not played with Brock all that much, but he seems to be winning lots of high-stakes tournaments. I presume he can get after it. I did go for the small bet, and I think this is probably ideal. And I think I would just not even have a big bet size here, because I realize my range needs a lot. My small betting range needs a lot of protection, meaning I need to have a lot of 3s here. I think small bet with everything's good in this scenario. He decided to pony up and blast me up to 80K. Very weird spot, because I know I have the 3s, right? So if I have the 3s, I'm just very well protected, because I have a lot of 3s and he has basically none. He has basically no 3s. Would this player, who I don't really know, just good kid, would he drastically overbluff here into a range that contains a lot of 3s? I don't know. In a spot where he doesn't have very many 3s, right? Would he presume, either correctly or incorrectly, that my small bet range contains almost no 3s? If that's the case, some people will just decide, I don't think you have it. I'm raising. If I had to guess what happened here, I think he probably just had ace 3. Probably just had ace 3. Maybe he sneaks in a few bluffs in this scenario with busted draws, but I remember this hand in real time. I was like, I kind of felt like I was getting outplayed. Like he just decided, you don't got it, I'm blasting you. But I'm not even sure that's how kids think anymore today. Old school players, sure. They can sense it and realize you don't have the nuts and they'll just get after it. To be fair, maybe that's what Brock's doing. I don't know. But I think this is a spot where we have a pretty reasonable fold. I mean, look, if I'm betting small with all the 3s here, like I'm pretty sure I would have, then you can just fold out non-nut hands here. And I don't have all that many bluffs to begin with. This is a hand where if I bet and get called, I win the vast majority of the time. If I bet and get raised, it's just a fold. And I should I think I should almost never get raised here. So we fold. I don't remember what happened in this tournament because it's all a blur. I know a lot of people, in order to bust, I mean, a lot of people like really hang on to every poker hand they played ever in their whole life. I don't really do that so much. I try to let it go. I will go home, study the spots, and forget about them. And just try to relax and be well prepared to play in the next tournament. And I think that's probably for the best. I know a lot of people lose sleep over hands or dwell on hands. Like, I certainly could have lost sleep on this hand, but what good is that going to do me? What good is dwelling on this hand going to do for me? And I think the answer is just not a lot, right? So if it's not going to do me a lot of good to dwell on this, take a look at it, study it, make sure nothing like horribly bad happened, and move on. After this, I lost. I don't remember how. One quick thing before we wrap up today. I'm currently on a trip with my family. This is not my house, not my normal setup, but go figure. Today is the day that we reached 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. It's been a very long journey that started, a long time ago. And know that while this is an amazing milestone, I have no intention to stop making high-quality, consistent, educational, marginally entertaining content for all of you. I could not have made this channel what it is without the feedback from all of you. So keep giving it to me. If you have any particular type of video that you love, let me know and I'll make more of it. If there's anything you really dislike, let me know that too. I may or may not stop doing it. I'm going to keep being me. But, criticism, especially in the constructive variety, is very good. So anyway, thank you very much for helping me reach 100,000 subscribers. And that's it for today. Good luck in your games, have fun, and I will see you in the next video. Hello! Do I have your attention? Good! You know I love to give away lots of free strategy advice here on my YouTube channel, so do me a quick favor. Can you click the subscribe button right here and right down here below? Thank you! See you in the next video.